Reporter Aoife Moore.
Now, the Northern Health Trust is being investigated over its lack of care provision for a 36-year-old man with a severe brain injury. Gareth Waterworth was a psychiatric patient at Knockbracken in 2007 when, for some reason, he left the hospital and was knocked down by a bus outside.
For 10 years, his mother, sister and grandfather cared for him, almost incomprehensibly. They all died for different reasons within a 2-year period. And since 2019, Gareth's uncle, Paul Herbert, has been his carer, and he's received no outside support. He's been speaking to Tara.
Gareth's typical day is in the mornings. Everything's an event. You know, everything has to be set out for him in the mornings, and I have to make sure everything goes according to a different plan, or rather according to what he feels comfortable with. So basically we get up and he gets washed and he makes a cup of tea for me sometimes too, which is good for him, and then I would look after him. During the day, he's very dependent on his iPad. Every day that's what he goes to, and he loves music and he listens to it most of the day. And every so often I've got to interact with him. There could be a problem with the iPad, there could be a problem, could be a neighbour's door closing. All of these type of things come into the mix with Gareth, whereby he has to feel secure and safe within his environment. But that takes up all day. If the most I can leave Gareth for is maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, and let me say to the neighbour, look, just, you know, because anything can happen within that time, because of the brain injury, our understanding is that the side of the brain that controls the emotion has been damaged, which means it just keeps rising. So it can get to a very, very serious set of circumstances very quickly. Now, it was hard enough, my late sister and I and my late father dealing with that, but now I'm on my own with it, and it is fairly heavy duty, yeah.
What impact have those bereavements that are almost too difficult to comprehend in such quick succession? You find yourself, you know, caring with your sister and your niece and your father for your nephew's had this terrible traumatic incident happen to him, and now you find yourself, all of those people are no longer with us.
I think, Tara, that I'm very conscious that, you know, that particularly in our jurisdiction there's a lot of misery and pain to people and loss, and we certainly don't have the monopoly on tragedy or pain, but perhaps we have a measure of it. One of the things particularly that I have real difficulty talking about is the death of Rachel, Roberta's daughter, who died suddenly at home in her arms due to an undetected ulcer that perforated. So from then, Roberta struggled with the loss and cope, or the loss and, I suppose, hope being distinguished, of course, but Gareth still needs care. He still needs care. And now with my sister, my father passed away in 2019. My sister couldn't go to the funeral because of Gareth's current needs. And then a year later, my dear sister died, and I couldn't stay with her when she was dying because I had to get home to my boy.
Yeah, that interview being conducted by Tara Mills, Paul Herbert speaking there. We have Sara Boyce in studio with us, who's a campaign organiser with the human rights group PPR. And you first and foremost, this is something you know very well. You supported Paul throughout this process.
Yes, hi, good evening. Yeah, I mean, I think listening again to Paul talking to Tara, I don't think anybody listening to that couldn't take anything out of that but just to conclude that that's an intolerable situation for any one person to be in. It's just unconscionable to think that this has been allowed to continue, and that yet another day, another week, another month. There was a court ruling back in May, in the middle of May, when Paul was forced to bring a case against the RQIA, who are the regulatory body for health, because after a number of years of trying to get them to investigate the failure of care for Gareth, he felt he had no other option but to bring it to court. And it's now 6 months on, but yet nothing, as Paul said today, Gareth still does not have any care, and Paul himself is forced to provide that care. I think one of the things is that we hear a lot now about trauma-informed approaches to healthcare and to mental health care. But when you listen to what's happening there, I mean, that's about as far away from a trauma-informed approach. Instead of being trauma-reducing, it's actually trauma-inducing.
And this isn't even the Northern Trust. This is the RQIA. It's the oversight body. Now, they have said in a statement that it is undertaking steps It is taking steps to undertake an inquiry into this matter, and it says it would therefore not be appropriate to comment further at this time. Does that give you a sense that the inquiry has even started yet?
So I think Gareth and Paul clearly have been victims of all of this. First of all, the monumental failures by both the Trust and the RQIA, but ultimately the Department of Health, which is where the buck stops. But now that failure has been replaced by delay. So we've heard now that the RQIA are going to undertake a review. But really, this case and the way this case is handled and being handled by the RQIA, the Trust and the Department, it's a litmus test for the thousands of families who are relying, they're in receipt of mental health services, disability, learning disability services, and they are relying on the RQIA to ensure that the services their loved ones are getting are safe and are fit, and meet the standards that they should. But the reason we say it's a litmus test is if you think that Paul took that judicial review in May, what that exposed, one person had to bring it, exposed that for 14 years the RQA were not regulating community mental health services. How did that happen, and how was it allowed to continue happen? Because from at least 2017, the Department of Health knew, the Health Committee knew, all the political parties and RQIA. But the other thing, if I can say, is just when the judgment came out, basically the response from the RQA and the Department of Health was nothing more than sort of shrugging their shoulders and saying, oh, that's great, thank you for clearing that up for us. This was a legal duty under law for the RQA to regulate. So the implications of that, and now we have the RQA saying they're going to investigate the Northern Trust. It's very difficult, if not nigh impossible, for families to have any confidence in the RQIA, given what families in the New Script campaign, and many of them have experienced the most, devastating harm, losing their children while under the care of trusts, including the Northern Trusts. But for those families to see that response from the department and the RQIA, without even an acknowledgement of the harm that's been caused, it's very difficult for families to move forward.
But I want to be very clear. Paul and Gareth have not received yet the help that they are asking for, and the RQIA is, in its words, taking steps to undertake an inquiry. Is there any evidence to suggest that there has been improved oversight more generally of community mental health services by the RQIA in the last 6 months?
That's exactly the problem, Declan. There is no evidence. So we, after the judgment, we did exactly that as PPR. We wrote to the Department of Health with a series of questions. So the things we asked the department to tell us so that we could then see what was changing. We asked for an explanation, a clear explanation as to why this failure happened and how it was allowed to happen. We also asked how many people, how many families are potentially affected by this failure. I mean, this was very, very serious. We asked what services were included in the remit around community mental health, and the department came back and said, we don't know. We don't know.
When was that?
That was, well, we wrote in June, the middle of June, and over 3 months later we had a response from the department, and basically the response boiled down to, we don't know. And there, at the moment there isn't any planned inspection regime for community mental health, so it is very difficult putting all of that together, and the attitude of the department and the RQIA for families to feel anything other than, it feels like they're trying to sweep this under the carpet still. We would want the department and the Permanent Secretary, Peter May, to come out. We don't think having a review, if that's what they're going to do, precludes the Trust primarily from putting in place a care package, an appropriate care package for Gareth Waterworth.
Some might argue as well, and they were approached by Tara and the team to speak, and that's the statement. They're taking steps to undertake an inquiry, therefore it would not be appropriate to comment any further. Are you satisfied with that? Because we don't have to talk about Paul's and Gareth's case specifically, but there's an argument to say that there are general questions here that should be answered by the regulator, and they are choosing not to speak on that publicly.
Absolutely. That's exactly what's happening here. We don't understand why there needs to be a review, in that the RQA knew about this since 2017. Tara had said that she has seen all of the paperwork and documentation, and there is so much of it. What else needs to be reviewed? This is about one young man's care, a care package that was withdrawn in 2016. So that's in relation to that Gareth specifically, but all of those questions that people now have, and instead of beginning to build some trust, what's happening here is actually eroding any little bit of trust that was there. Can I mention something else as well that we have discovered? One of the things in 2009 that the RQAA said they were committing to do was to set up 2 reference groups for service users, carers, advocates.
What do you mean by reference group?
So bringing in families, service users, carers to sit on advisory groups for the work and the policy of RQIA. Those groups were never set up. Now, we have FOI'd to find out why not. But yet again, the more you look into this, the more problems there seem to be within RQIA. So taking all of that in the round, it's very, very difficult for families to have confidence. At this stage, we need the Permanent Secretary to come and meet families, to talk to families. It's not good enough for the trust and the RQA to say there's a review ongoing, we can't comment. How long is that going to take?
It's every just too day, opaque for you.
Every day for Paul and Gareth is another day, a traumatic, adding to their trauma.
That's the very humbling thing about this, because we spoke last May after the ruling, and I'm delighted that Tara and Paul have picked this story up again, and you've come back in to speak to us about it, because it's very easy when we're in this position and we cover a news story and you kind of forget that between then and now, day after night after night, this situation has continued for Paul, while the rest of us have been diverted by other stories, other events, and events will always happen. But this has just continued day in, day out, and here they are again with nothing to show for it, really.
Yeah, and the Paul and everybody else involved in the New Script campaign are very pleased to see the BBC doing this, to picking this back up again, because it is something that really needs a light shone upon. In the first instance, to sort out a care package. I mean, this is not beyond the, this can be done. This could be done.
Well, we just spoke half an hour ago
to somebody who did.
DJ Calvert, who was born without hands or legs, and was told 2 weeks ago there was going to be nothing. And in 2 weeks, they've managed to find something. So things can move quickly when they need to.
And it's the exact same in this
situation,
case.
And I'm sure different forces are at play.
Everything has been done to highlight and to try to get the trust and the RQIA, who have the responsibility to regulate where there's poor or a failure of mental health care, but ultimately the department, and also, can I say, the political parties who, Paul and the New Script campaign, we've been in touch with them all. They are all supportive and support Paul in his battle to get care, but now we need to hear the parties coming out publicly and saying what needs to happen.
Sarah, thanks very much for coming back in. It's a remarkable story, or thanks to Tara as well, who's kind of kept on that and kept with it 6 months on, and we will continue to do so. But that's Sara Boyce from the human rights group PPR. And look, if you have a similar story, if there's anything you want us to take a look at for you, 81771 is the text number.
Slightly later than advertised, we'll go for a summary of the news now. Karen English.
Richard, thank you. The first case of